AM 1200. Or TK99 if you're on the FM. This is Turn Up the Radio by Autograph.
All right, let's go to our guest line to bring out our good friend Mike McAllister to talk about the news today. And Mike, have at it. Were you surprised that it was Steve Angeli over Ricky Collins?
I was not surprised. Honestly, I probably wouldn't have been real surprised either way. I do think it would have been a little more of a surprise if it was Ricky Collins over Steve Angeli, just because I think the narrative among most and the gut feeling among most when Steve committed to Syracuse was that he was going to end up being the starting quarterback. And so now that that's official, not really a surprise, but I do think that Ricky made it a lot closer than what people thought. And ultimately, I think they're going with the guy that they feel is, the most ready to be kind of that steady hand and sort of the higher floor type of a situation.
What do you think ultimately happens with Ricky Collins? I think that in this day and age, we just assume, okay, guy doesn't win the starting job, then he's definitely going to transfer. What do you? And I know there's some speculation involved in this, but what do you think his future is here at Syracuse?
Yeah, it's so hard to say because a lot of things could happen between now and when that window opens, right? Like Game 3, Steve Angeli could have an injury, and then Ricky takes over for the rest of the year and has a fantastic season, and he's the guy going forward. Steve could have a fantastic year the entire year, and Ricky barely plays and decides he wants to go elsewhere because he's ready. He feels he's ready to play. You could have a situation where Steve is the starter, but Ricky mixes in here and there in certain formations and in certain packages and shows enough that they say, hey, we still want you to be the future at Syracuse, and we're still going to reward you from an NIL perspective accordingly. And he decides that he wants to stick around and is willing to wait his turn. There's a lot of scenarios here. I think most people do honestly expect that when you don't win the job that you're going to end up taking off. But I think for now, his focus is, being the best teammate he can be, preparing to be the starter, even though, it is going to be Steve's job, and being ready if and when his name is called. That's, I think, the only thing that he can do at this point.
We saw both teams name their starter, right? Tennessee did so yesterday. Joey Aguilar ends up getting the job, as expected, the Appalachian State transfer. What are your thoughts on both coaches deciding not to keep it under wraps, just to make it public, have both guys, take all the snaps with the ones for the next 2 weeks and get ready for the opener, opposed to, trying to keep it a secret up until kickoff?
I think it's a breath of fresh air, to be honest with you. Ultimately, how much of a competitive advantage do you gain from keeping that in-house and trying to force the other team to prepare for two quarterbacks? I mean, most of these coaching staffs have connections basically everywhere and can, even if the information isn't publicly reported, can kind of figure out what the situation is. So ultimately, I like it. I like the fact that both are willing to be transparent. And I think it also speaks, highly to the team as well. Like, hey, guys, we're going to make a decision. We're going to let you guys all know this is how we're moving forward so that we're all together and on the same page. There's no, trickery here. There's no shadiness, nothing like that. We're being open, transparent, and honest, and we're going forward that way. I think it's a good message from both coaching staffs, to be honest.
All right, so we now know SU's QB1. What other position battles are you, or depth chart questions do you have as we approach the opener here less than 2 weeks away?
I'm really intrigued by defensive line because I know they brought in David Reese, who's listed as a defensive lineman. I think he's going to be an edge type of player. He's going into his 8th year, which is crazy in and of itself, but does he end up getting one of the starting jobs? That's an interesting thing that I'm watching. And then defensive tackle. I think everyone kind of expects that Tank Wilson's going to take one of those spots, but the other starting position, could it be George Rooks, who they brought in from Boston College, who has ACC starting experience? Could it be Chris Thomas, who they brought in from Marshall? Very highly touted guy that they brought in from the transfer portal. Rashard Perry showed a lot of flashes last year when he filled in due to injury. So they've got a lot of options at both tackle and at end. And I'm curious to see not only who starts, but how those rotations work. And then, of course, people are curious about the offensive line. There's a lot of options, I think, at every position. And I think an underrated one is who's going to start at running back. Now, I think most people expect that Yassine Willis has the potential to be a breakout player this type of year, but we remember last year, Will Nixon was the primary backup to LaQuint Allen, and he looked pretty good when he was in there before he got hurt. So does he end up getting the start because his skill set maybe more closely resembles what LaQuint did, or Yassine Willis, kind of the speed power combo with the huge ceiling? Does he get the nod? As all reports have been that he's been really good this spring and this fall.
You bring up the offensive line. The fact that Steve Angeli has been named the starter, I think some fans have looked at it and said, well, if the O-line's not good, then Ricky Collins is going to be the starter because they're going to need somebody who can scramble. Do you read into it all that Angeli was the starter? Does it make you feel better at all about the offensive line, or do you not read into it like that?
Maybe a little bit. I didn't think it was quite that cut and dry, that it's, if the offensive line isn't good, then they're definitely going to go with Ricky, and if it is, then they're definitely going to go with Steve. I don't think it was quite that black and white and simple, but I do think that you can read into it a little bit and say, if they really thought the offensive line was bad, then, yeah, you would think they would lean towards Ricky. But they must feel pretty good. I think they feel pretty good because they've got a lot of talent. They have a lot of size, and then they've got some guys that can play multiple positions. Joshua Miller is battling for the starting center spot with Austin Collins, but he's also worked at guard, and he spent time at tackle last year. So they've got some versatility there, and I think they've got some options, and we'll be interested to see who the top five are. But as we saw last year, even if you're not one of the starters, you're going to rotate in and out. They rotate their offensive linemen, which is not something a lot of teams do.
Anything we should know on the recruiting front from a football perspective?
A couple of local notes, actually. A guy to watch in 2027 is tight end Oakley Keegan from Liverpool High School. He's really good prospect, already has power conference offers from multiple different conferences. Syracuse got in on him early, but he's an intriguing one. And then 2028 defensive back James Brumfield from Monroe High School in Rochester. Syracuse was his first offer, which he got between his 8th and 9th grade year after a strong camp performance, not this past summer, but the summer before in 2024. And he's slated to visit Syracuse for the Duke game, and I think you're going to start seeing some of those things start trickling out with players making plans, recruits making plans to attend games. But especially those with the local flavor, those seem to be a couple that are high on Syracuse's recruiting board and are two talented prospects in upstate New York.
Talking about recruiting, what about on the basketball side of things? Anything we need to be aware of?
Nothing really new. Obviously, we know that Jordan Smith cut his list, and Syracuse is heavily involved there. But otherwise, it's been relatively quiet. They're starting to schedule some official visits for this upcoming fall, but it's been largely pretty quiet on that front.
What about Kyle McCord? Do you think he's going to make your Eagles roster there?
I've kind of gone back and forth on this. I could see them trying to add him to the practice squad just because, they've got Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who has some starting experience and a lot of experience that Kyle McCord doesn't have quite yet. It really depends on how they feel about Kyle being potentially scooped up by someone else if they're on your practice squad. But obviously we know that Jalen Hurts is a starter. We know Tanner McKee is the backup, but Tanner McKee is also very highly respected. So if someone makes Philadelphia an offer for Tanner McKee that blows him away, or do they feel comfortable enough trading him away, having Dorian Thompson-Robinson be the primary backup, and then have Kyle McCord be the third quarterback? That's another potential option, but all reports that I've read is that during camp he's been pretty good, but I know during the preseason it's been a little up and down, not entirely his fault, given some of the receivers that he's playing with are players that aren't expected to make the roster. But ultimately, I do think he has a future in the NFL. He's just getting started, and I do hope that he's able to stick with the Eagles.
One more NFL question. Who have you been most impressed by during this preseason? LaQuint Allen, who's playing really well with the Jags. Oronde Gadsden, the Chargers, sounds like he's very much in their plans this year for their offense. And Jackson Meeks, he's had 2 great preseason games. And as he said yesterday, he's trying to make a difficult decision on the coaches. Who's been most impressive to you?
It's been Meeks, and I think mainly because his was, I think, the most unexpected from an outside perspective, meaning I think everyone kind of thought that LeQuint was in a really good spot in Jacksonville where he could make that roster. And, with his talent and especially his ability to be a good blocking running back and picking up blitzes and understanding blocking assignments, that I think gives him a leg up on some of the other running backs on the roster. And frankly, Detroit's pretty loaded at wide receiver. They've got a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball, and so an undrafted wide receiver coming in and making a name for himself, not that it's unheard of, but typically that path is a little bit more difficult, and he has been outstanding this preseason. And so if for some reason the Lions decide to cut him, I think someone's going to pick them up and give him a shot on a roster.
Yeah, he has certainly opened some eyes. It's kind of like somebody goes to the NBA Summer League, they play well, they don't necessarily latch on with that team, but somebody else gives them an opportunity. And you're right, I would expect that Jackson Meeks is going to get an opportunity with somebody, even if it's a practice squad player to start the year. He certainly opened some eyes. Mike, as always, great stuff. Thanks so much for coming on, and enjoy your week.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, Mike McAllister.